Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Valerie Hope. Welcome once again this week to Time to Come Alive. This webcast is an opportunity for you to become even more connected to yourself, more conscious of yourself, connected to other people, and then with those two elements, you're able to create something special in the world. It's an opportunity for us to also listen in on a conversation that will bring all of those elements, those three elements to light. And today's guest is no exception. We're going to have a wonderful time talking to Trish Kruse in just a moment, and I'll introduce her briefly. Now, before we get started, though, make sure that if you're watching this live on Facebook, you're listening to the recording on YouTube, please forward it to your own community, your circle, because this also brings up conversations in your community, in your circle, that could bring consciousness, connection, and creation. And we would love to make sure that we can, create a ripple effect out of this conversation today. Now, before we do any of that, we just want to get present and get mindful about what we're going to have a conversation about today. So I invite you, if you are in a comfortable place, to sit, feet firmly planted on the ground. You might want to take a couple of deep cleansing breaths just to refocus. Some might find it helpful to close your eyes. Some of you might find it helpful to just unfocus your gaze just a tad so that you can look inward. And as you're continuing to breathe, I want you to think about, on a scale from 1 to 10, when you think about the work that you're doing in the world. That may be your career, that may be your family life, it may mean how you're involved in your community. On a scale of 1 to 10, I want you to give yourself a rating for how fulfilled you are with those roles or that role currently. So just feel it in your body, feel it in your mind's eye, see it in your mind's eye. 1 to 10, how fulfilled you are, whether that's your career, your community, your family, wherever you're spending your creative energy. Okay, now that you have a number in your mind, I want you to think about what are the elements that are contributing to that. You think about, is it the people? Is it the environment? Is it where you're doing these events or activities? Is it the skill sets or gifts that you're using, or perhaps not using enough? Could it be the product or services that are being offered? Or perhaps are they aligned with who you are and what you want to produce and create in the world, or are they not? Think about all the elements that may be contributing to the number that you gave, that rating you gave yourself. Just take another breath. Sit with that for a moment. And as you listen to our conversation today, consider what might you do to maintain a high number if you rated yourself high. What might you do to shift your number if it's lower to a higher number? Or what might you need to do with the environment or perhaps the people so that all the others that are around you that may be impacting this experience raise their level of fulfillment as well. All right, take another deep breath. You may open your eyes or refocus your gaze. Welcome back. Now I want to introduce my friend Trish Kruse. Trish and I met maybe 3-4 years ago, Trish.
Right.
My goodness, I can't believe it. It doesn't feel like I've been anywhere for that long sometimes. But Trish and I attended the same church for a couple of years at least. And then Trish, you went on to the greener pastures across the country. So today I find myself in Dallas, Texas still. And Trish, you are now in?
Phoenix, Arizona.
Phoenix, Arizona. Look at that. Both of us enjoying near 100-degree weather.
Yes.
So thank you so much for being with us today. I was really captivated by the conversation we had, I would say maybe a month or so ago, before coming into this program about your life and the trajectory, really the journey that you've been on for the last few years and the things that you've shifted significantly as a result. So
Yes.
first of all, before we go into that, anything else that you'd like to add to your introduction?
Oh, I think you did a great job introducing. I am just so happy to be here and just so happy to share with you and your listeners and watchers a little story.
Just a little. Well, the one thing I wanted to share with you, with everyone, is have you share actually, Trish, the reason that you wanted to come on to Time to Come Alive and share the story. Can you just give us a glimpse at what propelled you or what encouraged you to do this?
So, unfortunately for me, I have decided that, or I had decided that things weren't working well for me in the trajectory or path that I was taking. And I did not heed that. I didn't pay attention to it. And so I took a bumpy journey. And I wanted to come today just to share my story so that other people might learn from something and may not have to have as bumpy of a journey as I did when they are bumping up against core values or paths that they want to take.
Got it. Good. No one wants a bumpy journey on purpose.
Now, on purpose. Yeah.
Unless you're like an amusement park or something. People pay for those.
Right.
Okay, so let's start with this. When we did the mindfulness exercise earlier, what rating did you give yourself about how fulfilled you are currently in whatever it is that you're doing? Where did you look, first of all, and what rating did you give yourself?
What was that first part of that question? Where did I what?
Where did you look? Like what was it work? Is it your family life, community?
Okay. Yes. So I looked at my work life and I actually rated myself a 5 because I absolutely love what I'm doing. I travel around the country. I give seminars in communication skills, leadership skills, and that sort of thing. And I wouldn't want to be anywhere else, except the reason it's a 5 is because I do one-day seminars with people and I don't get to build true connection. People come into my life and then I never get to see what happens after that. And so one of the things that I know that I want to build is that eventually I have more longer lasting relationships with the people that I interact with in my business.
That's really interesting to note because yes, the way, maybe perhaps the way in which you do what you do, you enjoy, you love, but it's that longevity that's important to you that's right now missing. And that has such an impact on the energy which one does with which one does their work. It also has an impact on how fulfilling it feels to you. So that's really great to know. You might be doing the right thing, but are you doing it in the right way? Right? So those are the questions to ask. Cool. Okay, so take us to the beginning of the bumpy journey.
Okay.
And again, starting off with where you were or what area you were looking at in this journey, and then what at the time was the rating that you'd given yourself then?
Okay. So when I very, very first started off and working for a large corporation, a very large corporation, my daughter was around 14 years old at the time, and I jumped in wholeheartedly. And I loved working for this corporation. I would give myself an 8 or a 9 at the beginning. I felt a number of things. I felt strong as a role model to my daughter and the other young women who were coming into my home because of her friends and that sort of thing. I felt like I was making an impact on people's lives. I was a manager, and so I had young people who most of them first-time jobs or entry-level positions, and I felt that I was able to give them some guidance and mold them, and really, I loved it. That's where I was in the beginning.
Fantastic. And just in transparency, which sounds ironic to say in full transparency, we're not even going to mention the organization, because the idea here is not to talk or make wrong a company or corporation or industry, but really to look at the personal experience. So for those of you who are hanging on to every word, trying to figure out what corporation is she talking about, it will not be mentioned. We don't want that to take away from your personal experience. So I appreciate you doing that. Okay, so you were in a place that you loved. You really thought you had an opportunity to not only model for your daughter and other young women, but also guide, mold a lot of young leaders as well, it sounds like.
Yes.
So talk to us a little bit about 8 or 9. So what was it about who you were at the time in your life and what you were doing that seemed to gel so well?
I was in a time of my life where I had given up some power. And when I took over this position, when I moved into the corporate world, I owned my power. I worked in almost an entirely male corporation, or at least the part of the business that I was in. And I was respected, and I really I grew in that. I just felt so powerful, and that I had meaning, not only for me, but for others. Does that make sense?
So you said that you gave up, there was a point in your life prior to, it sounds like, where you felt you gave up power. Can you describe what that means, giving up power and then feeling powerful? What exactly does that mean for you?
Yeah. So I have always been, I'm going to say career driven, but I'm not sure that that's exactly the right word, career. But I've always been somebody who has taken my work life seriously. And I made a move to New Jersey, and I became a house mom for a period of time. And it wasn't the right move for me. There are some people who are really, really good at being a stay-at-home parent. And I began to diminish. My world began to get smaller because I moved to a state where I didn't know anybody. And so I had no connections with people, and it just began to diminish me. So I made a decision to say, you know what? I am not being a good role model to my child, because what she's seeing is me being unhappy, staying at home. I'm going to go out and I'm going to do what's right for me. And by doing what's right for me, it's going to be right for her. It's going to be right for everybody else in my life. That's what I meant.
Okay, got it. So the idea of diminishing your power sounds like it has less to do with the role that you had, but more the spirit or the energy and enthusiasm that you felt about it.
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I want people to be really clear that power is not equated to a position or a role. Here we're just talking about how aligned and enthusiastic, or how much energy you're able to experience and to express whatever you're doing.
Yes.
The higher the energy, the higher the enthusiasm, the greater the level of power.
Yes. Yeah. Power has nothing to do, in my opinion, with position, pay, any of those things. Power has to do when you are your true self and you're shining through, because people see that passion in you.
Yeah. That's really, I like that, because a lot of it, when we use the word empower other people, it's not about giving someone decision-making power necessarily, although sometimes the connotation people might use that connotation. What I look at it as is helping people make sure that they're aligned, You know, that's one of the things I think, and we, in our world, when we're working with people in coaching situations or training, what we're doing is empowering people with information so that they align themselves with the fullest expression of themselves, and their energy and enthusiasm could contribute to whatever they're accomplishing.
That's right.
Cool.
That's
okay,
right.
so you were in this situation. You didn't necessarily feel that powerful. You didn't feel like you were being the model parent that you wanted to be. So what shifted? How did you realize that that was happening and that needed to change?
So I know the answer. It's just very personal. So here's what happened. The relationship that I was in with my daughter's father was ending, and it just made me think about who am I and how am I going to spend this next part of my life? What's going to happen here? How am I going to move into being a single parent and being the best that I can be, and not taking all of the negativity that sometimes comes with something like that. And I'll remember the day so clearly when I stood up and I said, that's it. I'm through crying about this. I'm through feeling scared about this. I'm going to make a move. And that's what I did. I started looking for positions that I thought I would be good at. I started to look for a place to live that would make me feel really good inside. And I found this 150-year-old little house in this amazing little Revolutionary War town in the middle of New Jersey that was a picture postcard perfect. Everything aligned the day that I said, I'm done being sad and I'm going to take control of my life and make myself productive, happy, conscious, connected.
So what did that look like? What exactly? So you found this home, you decided that you weren't going to be living in in the situation that you were living in those years. What happened after that? So you started pulling plugs and flipping switches, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
What was that what was the emotional impact?
It was one of the most uplifting times of my life because I was so aligned. I have to tell you, I found that house. I drove around this tiny little town every day for a few weeks. It was maybe 5 minutes from where work would be. And this house I had driven past, and all of a sudden this little rent sign came up on the window. I literally was late for work that day because I stopped and said, come over, I want to look at this house. I was in there for 5 minutes. I said, this is it. This is what I want. And it just, there were these layers. I'll call them layers of power and layers of pleasure that just were building on themselves. I loved the new job that I had. I loved my boss, and all of this connection came. And my daughter benefited so much from that because it was a time when it could have been very, very scary for her. But what she saw was that no matter what kind of adversity you have, if you hit it head on and you do what's right for you, then you're going to be okay.
Yeah, that's a wonderful lesson to impart. I don't know, how old was your daughter at the time?
She was 13, 14. She was like 8th grade.
Okay, yeah, kids, from what I've learned, they're paying attention the whole time. But that's where a lot of their life decisions start becoming, they start making them a lot more intentionally. Yeah. So it looks like you created a great backdrop for some of her own growth.
Right.
Okay, so was this the job that you loved at the time, or
that's the job that I took at that time. Yeah.
Where you rated yourself in fulfillment 8 or 9.
That's right.
Gotcha. Okay. So then what happened? So we're
Yeah.
on this journey. So far, it sounds like the biggest bump was actually moving and
Right.
deciding that you weren't going to be in the relationship,
Right.
finding you and your daughter a place to live, finding
Right.
the right job. And
Right.
then tell us more.
And years go by where I'm feeling fulfilled. My daughter goes through school, and I had always told her that living in New Jersey we're not from New Jersey. I'm a California girl, and but my father lived in Texas. And I always told my daughter, when she graduates from high school and goes off to college, that I would take a transfer with this company and move to Texas to be closer to my father. So that's what got me into Texas. And I had probably 3 or 4, maybe 5 years, 6 years with this company in Texas, where I went from Fort Worth to Abilene to Dallas, and I was promoting up higher and higher through this company. And on the outside, life looked really good. My family thought it looked good. Everybody thought it looked good.
What does that mean, look good?
So I was making good money, and I had worked for a prestigious company, and I had prestige within the company.
Okay.
So Patricia that's what my family calls me. Patricia is settled. Life is good for her, right? But here's what happened. About the same time that I moved to Texas, my values did not change, but they started to knock on the door and make themselves clear to me that even though this job and this company propelled me and helped me through some difficult times and made me stronger, that I had set aside some of my values in order to make this work for me. And what I mean by that is I gave up some things. I worked for a company that had a different set of values than I did. And some of those values are health values. There were things that this company promoted and does that do not promote healthy living. And I set that aside for so many years. And I've watched so many other people who work for this company live healthy lifestyles, and yet are working for a company that does not promote a healthy lifestyle. But you let that go because there's other benefits. But it started to become really, really important to me that I was living out of alignment there. There was another thing that was happening, and that these young people that I mentioned that I got to mold, something changed in me around them as well. And what changed was there was a difference between how I wanted to work with these people and what the company wanted. That the company made choices around hiring procedures and cost savings that made me have to make these people work harder and longer and put the company before the family. When I interviewed people towards the end, those past couple of years, I had to say to them, Christmas, 4th of July, Memorial Day, Labor Day, all of these things, these family times are going to be our busiest times. And so if you want to work for us, you're going to have to understand that you aren't going to be able to have that type of time with your family during those holidays. And of course, every single person would say, not a problem, not a problem. And then the time would come and the child would have, a Christmas recital or something that they weren't able to go to. And it really started to wear on me that here I am. One of the reasons that I started this job was because I wanted to be a great role model for my child, and I wanted to help her by seeing how strong and independent I can be as a woman. And now I'm telling these people, family second. Mm-hmm. So can you see where this just started to be this rift between me, who I was internally, and me, who I was presenting to the world as a person who was promoting a product that I didn't believe in, and telling people that they had to put their salary and this company before family. We worked 7 days a week. Some people had to couldn't go to church on Sundays. It just didn't fit anymore.
It's interesting because when you talk about you've always had the same values, you said, right? You've always had the same values, and it sounds like family has been one of the biggest ones, especially your daughter, and being a role model for her, and encouraging others to also see family as number one. And health, right? So what was it about, first of all, about how long were you in the organization before these values started to kind of bubble up as being challenged?
So a couple things. First of all, it was probably about 7 years before the values started to be challenged. And here's one of the things that really made me sit up and listen, and that is this. For me, when things are going well, I am in alignment with my core values. And what I now know is that when I start to feel out of alignment, that it's time for me to check back in with my core values. And that is the thing that I didn't do. For years, I didn't realize that it was the way that I was treating people, the way that I was not holding up my health standards. There were years when I just didn't even realize that I was going against those core values. And the big learning lesson for me, Valerie, is that now I know that anything that I'm doing, when I feel like something is amiss, I'm going to go straight back to my values and say, what am I not looking at here? What value toes am I stepping on?
Okay, so I would love for you to paint us a picture of what that looks like. Like, when do you notice, or what is it that happens when you notice you're not in alignment? Like, is there something that you're saying? Is there something, are you not able to sleep? Like, can you kind of paint a picture?
Yeah, so just the opposite. I sleep too much. I sleep all the time. I pull away from social activities. I took a picture at one point. I was living in Abilene, Texas, and I took a picture of my living room kitchen and sent it to my sister and my daughter and said, I'm in trouble, because it was a total mess. And there are things that I know when I am out of alignment, I get depressed and I don't clean things, and I move away from relationships. And I was in such, when I knew you, when we were living in Dallas, you know, I was in such turmoil, and church was my only outlet for social activity, because I hid away from the world because I was embarrassed about the things that I was doing.
Wow. This is so good. Thank you for sharing this so far, because I can see that those are and they're so subtle sometimes, right? You mentioned sleeping a lot longer, maybe not saying yes to those invitations to go out, maybe being a little embarrassed to have people over. You know, there's little things like that might sound small, but in essence, they're like symptoms. They're symptoms for some greater unrest. And I mean, I could totally see that. I would even imagine thinking about how relationships are going. Maybe you are so more so when people are more social. I remember specifically in my life that I went to a party for New Year's one year and met this gentleman at the party, and we're talking and dancing, and he was sharing something about his multiple streams of income and how, working for a corporation is the worst thing that one could do. And at the time I was working for a corporation, very proud of what I did, as a matter of fact, and how he went on and on about how, no, that's not the way to go, because then you're tied, you're like in jail, you can't get out, you need to have all these anyways. And I remember being really upset, like bothered, irked, irritated by a perfect stranger who I just met for a 6-minute song or whatever, dance track, and I just couldn't shake it. Even the next day or two, until I had a conversation with my older brother where I discussed, I'm like, I don't know why this guy got under my skin so bad. But I point to this because I realized that there's something rubbing up against a value that I didn't realize, and I wasn't able to call it out at the time.
Yeah.
But what was fascinating is I also realized that what he was pointing to was that he had such a clear way of articulating how money was a value to him and how to acquire financial peace, where I wasn't able to articulate my value, because it was definitely different, but I just couldn't articulate it. And so I think what this conversation is bringing up, Trish, is that there are opportunities for us. Maybe we have a value, like we know family is important, and yet we may not have articulated it quite well enough for us to now be able to use it to make really clear decisions. Right? In order for us to actually say, well, what does that family value mean? We have to be able to say, well, it means this. This is what it looks like for me. This is when it's most fulfilling. These are the people around me. This is how I express myself to them, etc. So I love that you're pointing to this. So I'm curious about, okay, so you started noticing you were pulling away,
right.
You started to sleep more, all that.
Yeah.
What pointed to that being a symptom for something more?
I think what pointed it to be a symptom for something more is that I began to question, what's going on with me? Why am I this way? And why am I so unhappy? Because I had a whole group of people, family and friends, telling me, you're making good money, you have prestige, you have these things. And so then I started to do some research into my own self, and what do I truly value? And it's not the first time I had done some research around what I valued. I had a list of values that I knew were part of me. And then what I realized was this: I had money, not a value for me. I had prestige, not a value for me. But I didn't have time to be with the people that I loved because I was working 12 and 14 hours a day. I didn't have curiosity, which is a really big core value for me. I was not in a place that liked innovation. They just wanted things to be done the way that they've been done. Innovation costs money. So I just had to do some soul searching. I'm living in a way that does not fulfill me, that does not work for me. I need to go back to my core values and see where I have split off. And that's what I found. I found I'm living in Texas, not near any of my family members. I'm saving money for what I don't know. And I'm not helping people. I'm not growing people. I'm not making an impact with these very young, moldable people. And I don't want to do this anymore.
Oh, wow. Now you said your father was living here at the time? Or
Yes,
no?
he was, but he
In
had
Texas?
passed. He had
Okay.
passed. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Got
That's
it.
why I wanted to go there. I wanted to spend those last few years with him.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. So really, in essence, it was just you and your daughter here. And then
My
once your
daughter wasn't there. My daughter
no,
was
she
in
was in
college.
college at the time. So it's just
Yeah.
you.
Hmm.
Wow. Okay. So then it's interesting because I wonder, how did that show up at work when you started feeling that restlessness, when you started noticing that value friction? What happened at work?
Oh, a number of things. First of all, irritation. I I I didn't have uh, what's the word? I would get irritated with people quickly. I didn't have patience anymore. Um, that was one of the things that happened. My productivity dropped
Hmm.
because I would get up in the morning and I would just think, oh, another day. And I'd walk into work, and every morning I would get up and I would say, today's the day. It's going to be the old Trish. It's going to be that powerful Trish. And she's going to go in there and she's going to make a difference. And I would walk into that building and I would just go. And so my boss started to notice. That very last year was the first year that I received an evaluation that was less than stellar. And everybody else began to notice too. And so all of a sudden, people started to not trust me because I didn't trust myself, because I knew that this was not good for me. Not good for me to be living so far out of alignment with who I was. But I didn't know how to get out because everybody else around, I was fulfilling people around me's wishes for me and their values. And I had this big, big problem. How do I chuck it all and do what I'm supposed to be doing, which is helping others, and not disappoint all of these people around me?
Oh, that's really brilliant because, well, brilliant, sad, brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we think about, what you said is so key, that you started to notice how your values didn't match, right? You said that in the beginning. But there were all these other people who were saying, no, this is like the best thing,
Yeah.
because their values, perhaps, or quote unquote societal values, were being fulfilled. At least what people can see. And I think that's so good because we often use that as the measuring stick. Right? Well, does society think that I have a good job? Well, then it must be true. Does society feel like I have a great relationship? It must be true. Do I live in the right place? Right? And what
Yes.
you started to really do is like debunk that. That's not really the measuring stick
Right.
that works, right? That works. Not that societal values are good or bad. They just are. It sounds like for you it was really a matter of getting so clear about yours and understanding the importance of that you can then use, because I'm sure it created some friction in relationships too,
Oh, yeah.
especially at work, like you said, of
Yeah.
your supervisor. Okay, so I want to hear more about how that worked and how that happened. And I want to encourage those of you who are participating and listening in, if you have questions or comments for Trish about what she's sharing or your own version of this, please, write it in the chat if you are able to. If you're on the phone, if you want to make a comment, raise your hand by hitting *9. In just a moment, I want to open up the conversation for those who are participating today. So, okay, so
So
Trish, sorry.
yeah,
Trish,
let me just to kind of to bring it all together is that although I was doing this work, although I was understanding um, uh, where I was not living in integrity, I didn't know how to get out of it. And so I just stayed being miserable. And it all came to a head on December 23rd, 2015, a couple of days before Christmas. We were working nonstop hours and hours and hours of working. I had a new boss who made some financial decisions that really, really hurt my team. We were not allowed to have temporary folks come in. We weren't allowed to have equipment that we needed to come in, which we did every other year. This year, none of it, because she was new and she was trying to save money and that sort of thing. December 23rd, I am so done with this job. I am so done with these people who were just looking so tired and they're just so unhappy. I walked into work that day and my new boss was out on the floor and she decided that she was going to run this department, never having run this department before. And she began to make decisions that were unsafe. And as she was making these decisions, there were forklifts around. I was in a big, large warehouse. As she was making these decisions, I could feel myself disassociating, just moving farther and farther and farther away from the work. I kind of walked around that day like a shell-shocked person, like a PTSD person. I just wasn't all there. A young man came up to me at about 11 o'clock in the morning and said, "Ma'am, that lady over there wants me to get on this forklift and do this work, and I've never been on a forklift before, and I don't think it's safe. What should I do?" And I looked him in the face and I said, "She's the boss." And I walked away from him. And I walked into my office. I grabbed my backpack and my sweater, and I walked out the door. A few people came up to me, "Are you leaving?" And I shook their hands and said, "It's been nice." And so that on December 23rd, I walked out of that office, never to go back again. And I left the people who I cared about in the lurch, because now they didn't have a boss. And it was 2 days before Christmas. But I had broken. I was totally disassociated. I could see myself walking out of that building. And I got home and I immediately got on the computer to take a look at getting help for myself, to really get some help. Within a week, I notified my daughter, told her that I had just left Coca-Cola and was on my way to Costa Rica for a month, where I stayed with a lovely group of people who helped me to get back in touch with myself, to meditate, to go through some pretty stringent counseling, and to really figure out what the heck I needed to do to get back into alignment. And that's when I realized something. I didn't have to go through any of that, Valerie. All I had to do was listen to myself. All I had to do was go back to who I truly was and stop worrying about other people, and even people who were dead, like my mother. She had been gone for so many years, and yet I still was trying to please her by staying in that job. And I had put myself so far last that it finally took what I call a spiritual breakdown to get me to listen to myself again, to the me, the I am who I am. I was so disconnected that I literally hurt other people by being a poor boss to them before I made the decision to go back to who I am. And that's why I'm here on this show, is I want people to realize you find those little symptoms, and then you go inside and you figure out what's going on so that you can be the best you that you can be.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I want to play, I don't know, I hate to use the word devil's advocate because this doesn't sound very positive, but I can also see how, you just painted the discomfort that you were feeling up to the time when it really began to trigger that behavior. I could also say that that was feeling safe, right? You had some notion of safety, financial safety, security, right? You have all these obligations. I imagine that
Yes.
that was being able to support your daughter in college and your
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle, etc. And I can see how many people in any career where they might be experiencing those symptoms might prioritize that safety. Right? If you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that
Yes.
security is
Yes,
always
yes.
number one.
Right.
What you're talking about is that higher self-actualization, which is like the top of the pyramid.
Right.
There's so much in between. So I'm curious, what do you say about that safety being fulfilled, although one might feel triggered or irritated or not themselves or not fulfilled and values are not aligned? How does one make that jump where those needs now need to be looked at and see whether or not they can go higher?
Okay. First of all, realizing where you are, if you're on that safety level, and where you want to be on that self-actualization level. You have to have that realization. See, I didn't have that realization. I thought that that safety level was it, right? That's number one. Number two is this. Once you realize that you're not where you want to be, that you're not in that alignment, you don't have to jump like I did. What you do is you build a plan. What you do is you say, this is where I am living right now, out of alignment with these particular goals or core values or whatever it is. Here's where I want to be. And I need to start taking baby steps to get there. I need to start moving toward my truth of me, rather than resisting until the universe says no longer. See, that's, and there are people who never make the shift, and that the universe isn't going to be as blunt as it was with me. And all of a sudden one day they say, wow, I just lived this life and it was never the life I wanted to live. And so what I want people to do is just say, look at themselves and say, where am I? Where is it that I want to be? And what baby steps can I start taking to get here? Rather than sitting back and waiting for something to happen.
I remember hearing years, I think maybe it was Oprah or someone she had on her show say that, God starts by whispering, right? Spirit speaks to us in a whisper. And then there's like a little pebble, like a little, just knocking at your door. And then there's a brick upside your head.
Yeah.
And it sounds like what you're really saying is like, don't wait for the brick.
Yes.
If you can help it, if you're starting to hear the whispers and you're starting to notice the pebbles, those are all little cues that, hey,
Right.
wake up, there's something to look at, there's something to pay attention to, there's something to talk about, there's something to explore and be curious about.
Right.
Brilliant.
And just because I know you're going to open it up here in just a second, but and then, here's the beauty though, is that because all that pain that I put myself through, nobody else put me through it but me. The beauty is you come out on the other side. And that's when the sun starts to shine, or whatever you want to say, it made me do things like move closer. I'm living with one of my very best friends, and I have family within just a decent drive, and I have a job that I absolutely love. It's not a job. I work for myself. I travel around the country. I get to talk to people about leadership every day. And I'm not rich. And as I said to you earlier, I don't get to see these people long term, so I don't get to see some of the results of what it is that I do. So it's not perfect, but oh my gosh, I would never go back. I wish, no, let me just say, I'm glad I went through what I went through, but I don't want others to have to go through that. Just make the decision quicker and cleaner. That's it.
Yeah. Oh, no, I so appreciate that. And I think what you're also pointing to is that it's not necessarily about looking for perfection, it's looking for alignment. And once you figure out the alignment, then you can start bringing in different elements. You might, just out of this conversation, I imagine, begin to connect with some of those individuals at a deeper level. Perhaps right now the job isn't designed that way, but that doesn't mean that you can't behave that way.
Correct.
Right? So I love that. Okay, well, we have a couple comments. I want to bring someone in here. So we have Gail Blair in Allen, Texas. What do you want to share, Gail? You have to unmute yourself.
Hi, Trish.
Hi, Gail.
When I saw you were going to be on, I was so excited. And I get to see you face to face.
Yeah, nice to see you.
Yes. Yeah, I've been curious about, I wrote to Valerie and I said, I've been curious about exactly, I knew something shifted,
Right.
and I heard you talk at Unity on Greenville.
Right.
It's probably been about a year ago. It was fantastic. And I've been curious really ever since, what exactly happened.
Yeah.
It sounds like you had the same sort of moment that I had. Yeah. And where I call it being pushed out of the airplane because I wasn't going to go willingly.
Yeah.
Right. So I was fired for the first time in my whole life. So, when you said that you got that less than stellar report, then
Right.
It kind of reminded me of that. It's like, yeah, I got fired. And I got fired for something that was so ridiculous. And then I ended up, not being able to find a job, period. And I had just bought a house, 3 months prior to that. And so I basically, worked about, 5 or 6 jobs for a year before, all the ahas really started. I had to surrender is what happened. I just had to surrender. But I have a question. And I think you just kind of hit on it. Would it have been possible to, and this is for myself too. I wonder, I guess it wouldn't have been possible because it didn't happen that way. We had to have the brick. I'm like, what would it have been like if both of us could have gotten that aha, that wake up call and still been in the work that we were in?
Yeah.
I wonder what that would have looked like.
Yeah.
Because I believe we can live our purpose anywhere, but apparently we needed the brick.
A lot of people need the brick in different areas in different ways.
It gets too comfortable, and we get comfortable in that.
Yeah.
I was just too comfortable. That's what it was. And the funny thing is I'm the one that put that out there in 2009 even. I got fired in 2011. It's like, be careful what you ask for. Because in 2009, I'm going, life is great. I'm working 23 hours a week. I'm making buku money. I'm super happy. I'm not happy. I'm super, not even content's the word. I don't have anything to worry about, basically. And I'm going, but there's more. There's got to be more than this. Something, I just feel like that I'm not growing. That was it. And I'm like, I just feel there's a shift coming, and bam, that's what happened.
Right. Trish, yeah. What would it have looked like if you had noticed before the brick?
So I've been giving this a little bit of thought, and I think that part of it, Gail and Valerie, is that women who become successful, and this is changing, but for our generation, Gail, women who are successful and who are supporting themselves. I think that we intentionally don't look at our discomfort because we've been taught that. We were taught that. We were taught that we needed to prove ourselves. And so we were just, and you know, when I think of you, when I think of Gail Blair, I think of classy, beautiful, never any problems. Honestly, and that's, you know, and that's what we've been taught to put out to the world.
Yeah, it is.
You know, we have been taught to put this little thing. So a brick had to hit me because I was living the way that my generation said this is what we value.
Right. Yeah.
And I wasn't going to bump up against that. What would it have looked like differently? Oh, it would have been a much, much easier transition, and I would have been more ready for it, both financially and spiritually. Mm-hmm. But that's why I love working with young people. I'm so lucky that I get to work with college students on a regular basis, because I want to let them know that there are different ways to have a career path, and that you can be your true self.
Right.
That's so good. Yeah, we don't have to wait for the brick. Nothing wrong with the brick if you're building something with it. No, I'm really serious. Because there's going to be a preponderance of people who will get hit by a brick at some point, metaphorically, right? But use it to build. And I think that's what you're pointing to. You have the opportunity now to share your message, your lessons with others. Right. So whatever bricks you've collected over a lifetime, use them to build something of worth, something that will become a stepping stone for other people. Yes. And that's really good. I can't believe it.
That really is good.
Yeah, that's really good, Valerie.
but I so enjoyed this conversation. We're wrapping up the hour here, but I think there's a couple of nuggets that you shared that Trish and Gil, you two, that pointed to that are really, really important. And one is that bricks don't stop people, right? If you're stuck with it in your hand and you're telling the story of, oh my gosh, this brick hit me and I can't believe it's not fair in all these years. And if you're still stuck on that story, then there's likely another opportunity to see what can you do with this brick that might be of value, but also to really start to be more conscious when that unrest starts to hit. Ask questions. And I realized something too in your sharing, Patricia, that the actions don't necessarily have to be these grand gestures. Clearly, when you left the job, that was the grand gesture.
Right.
And some of these inklings that you started to have had perhaps you even just shared in conversation. I find that in order for us to be conscious of something, we have to be willing to share it. So it's one thing to have this internal insight, go, oh, that's interesting, I noticed X, Y, Z, and another one to actually have a conversation about it with someone you trust. Just say, hey, I'm feeling this way, I've noticed this. I feel like those are the small actions that we all can take in becoming more conscious. And I think that's why, I value so much my work as a coach, is because I help people externalize some of that internal turmoil. And that, once you lay that out, then, oh, now I know what to do with it. Or perhaps now I'm just more clear about what I'm dealing with. Mm-hmm. So that, I so appreciate that. Trish, any final words before we end the session?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me on and letting me tell this story. And, the word is this, just things don't only go bump in the night. Things go bump in your head and in your heart. And when they do, pay attention, please. Just notice.
Mm-hmm. Oh, very good. Thank you so much for spending time. I'm so glad that we got reconnected.
Yes.
Because longevity is important to you. I want to make sure that we continue to do that.
Yeah.
And for sharing your story and your message. And by the way, you did say the name of the company at the end.
Oh, I did. Oh, well.
You did, but I was in the moment, and it was like, boom. It was like this grand reveal. I think we kept people on their toes hoping for something to happen, some slip of the tongue, which you performed really well. So thank you.
Well, because I did that, let me just quickly say that the company did not change. I changed.
Mm-hmm.
The company did not change. I changed.
Yeah.
And all of the issues and troubles that I had with the company were internal, not the company.
There you go. Yeah, and that's also so good because it does point to any relationship that we're having. It's not about the relationship, it's about ourselves and who we're being in any given moment. So that's the first place to look.
Yes.
Excellent. Trish, thank you so much for joining us. Anyone that was here live, Gail, thank you for your comments and your questions as well. It's wonderful to see you again. And those of you that tuned in, again, I say I'll post this it's on Facebook Live currently, but you're also able to get the recording. Those of you who registered for the call, be able to share that with you directly. Begin to have these conversations with your own community. That's how we become conscious. That's how we get connected, and that's how we create something with all those bricks that we've been collecting. And looking forward to continuing this next week. We're actually going to have a wonderful conversation. I created this Best Bosses series for myself, where I've invited 3 people. So far, you've heard of one, Jonathan Chapo. Next week, we have Tim Schaefer, who's going to be joining us. And Tim was a boss of mine a couple years ago, and one of the best virtual teams I've ever worked on. And I know there's so many, there's so much information about virtual teams, how to create one that works. And his experience and also my experience being on his teams have been phenomenal. So I'm bringing him in next week to talk about that and what it is and what it takes to be a leader of a virtual team. So tune in again on September 10th. You can join us on Facebook Live. You can join us here on Time to Come Alive. Have a wonderful week, everyone. Looking forward to seeing how you build something of value with your bricks. Bye, everybody.